let's begin. But I warn you, this video will challenge everything you think you know about personal growth. It's not comfortable, it's not what the self-help industry tells you, and it's definitely not what you want to hear. But it is exactly what you need to understand if you're serious about evolving beyond where you are now. Since childhood, you've been programmed to look forward, to focus on goals, achievements, and the next level of success. You've consumed countless hours of motivation, read the books, attended the seminars. Yet something fundamental blocks your growth, something so deep you can't even name it. And yes, that something has a name, your mother. But here's what nobody dares to tell you. It's not your mother who's limiting your growth. It's what your unconscious mind absorbed from her about your own potential, your worth, and what you're allowed to become. The mother lives in your psyche as an internal ceiling, a glass roof you keep hitting every time you try to rise. You've tried to expand. You've set bigger goals. You've pushed harder. But growth doesn't come when you're still operating from an internal operating system that was programmed before you could even think for yourself. Do you know what that system says? It whispers limitations you mistake for reality. The maternal complex, that's what Carl Jung called it. And no, it's not just another psychological concept to analyze. It's an invisible force field around your potential. It's that voice that tells you to stay small, stay safe, don't outshine, don't risk too much. It's that gravitational pull back to the familiar, even when the familiar is limiting you. And the cruelest part? You think this voice is protecting you. You think it's wisdom, caution, being realistic, but it's not yours. It's an inherited program running in the background of your consciousness, determining how high you're allowed to climb before something inside you sabotages the ascent. You may wonder, how does something so unconscious have such power over your conscious efforts to grow? Here's where the real work begins. Because as long as you keep seeing your mother as just the person who raised you, you're missing the deeper truth. She represents your first experience with possibility and limitation, with permission and prohibition, with what's safe and what's dangerous about expansion. Every decision you make about how much you're allowed to succeed, every internal negotiation about whether you deserve more, every time you stop yourself just before the breakthrough, all of that has roots in an early, wordless education about your place in the world. And that education came through her eyes, her reactions, her fears, and her own relationship with growth. Here's the truth that will change everything. You don't need permission to grow, but you need to recognize you've been waiting for it. And that permission, or the lack of it, lives in the maternal archetype that occupies sacred space in your unconscious mind. Let me show you something that will explain why your growth keeps hitting the same invisible barriers, no matter how much effort you put in. There's an unconscious contract you made before you could even speak, a silent agreement about how much success, happiness, and expansion you're allowed to experience. And that contract was written in the language of your earliest relationship. Every child learns the rules of existence, not through words, but through emotional atmosphere. They absorb what's safe and what's dangerous, what brings approval and what brings withdrawal, what's possible and what's forbidden. Your mother didn't just feed and care for you, she unknowingly transmitted her entire belief system about life's possibilities directly into your developing psyche. If she lived in fear of taking risks, you absorbed that fear as wisdom. If she believed that too much success makes people targets, you internalized that as protection. If she thought that standing out was dangerous, that dreaming big was foolish, that safety meant staying small, all of that became your unconscious software about growth. But here's what makes this so insidious. You think these limitations are yours. You think you're being smart when you hold back, realistic when you lower your expectations, responsible when you choose the safe path. You don't realize you're following someone else's map of what's possible. Watch yourself the next time you're on the verge of a breakthrough. Notice what happens right before you would step into a new level of success, influence, or personal power. Something kicks in: anxiety, doubt, a sudden need to slow down, second-guess yourself, or find reasons why you're not ready. That's not your authentic wisdom speaking. That's the maternal archetype, protecting you from crossing lines that were dangerous in her world, not necessarily yours. The mother complex doesn't just limit what you do, it limits what you can even imagine for yourself. It creates a ceiling on your vision that feels like reality itself. You don't even consider certain possibilities because they exist beyond what feels emotionally safe. Your ambitions automatically scale themselves down to fit within the boundaries of what was modeled as acceptable. This is why traditional goal setting fails so many people. They set targets with their conscious mind, while their unconscious mind is running a completely different program. One that says, people like us don't do things like that, or success like that comes with a price. Too high to pay? Or, if you get too big, you'll lose love. Jung understood something profound. What we don't make conscious controls us. And this maternal programming is so deep, so early, so woven into your sense of reality, that it operates completely below conscious awareness. It's not a thought you think, it's the framework within which you think all your thoughts. Have you ever noticed how certain types of success feel foreign to you, even when you achieve them? How you might reach a goal, but then feel anxious, guilty, or like you don't belong there? That's your psyche telling you you've crossed into territory that wasn't marked as safe in your original programming. The most successful people aren't necessarily the most talented or hardworking. They're often the ones who somehow escaped or overcame these unconscious limitations early. They either had different programming installed, or they did the deep work to rewrite their internal operating system. But here's what's both terrifying and liberating. Those limitations aren't real. They never were. They were just one person's interpretation of reality, passed down to you when you were too young to question whether they applied to your life, your gifts, your time, your circumstances. Your mother's fears about growth were hers to carry, not yours to inherit. Her beliefs about what was possible were shaped by her own mother, her generation, her circumstances, her wounds. But you've been living as if they were universal laws instead of personal opinions formed in a different era, under different pressures, with different opportunities. The growth ceiling isn't external, it's internal, and it's not permanent. But you can't dismantle what you can't see. And you can't see what lives in your unconscious until you're willing to look at the deepest level of your programming, the level where your sense of what's possible was first formed, in the relationship that taught you about life itself. Now I'm going to reveal something that will explain why your growth feels like betrayal, why success brings guilt, and why every time you're about to break through to a new level, something inside you pulls you back. There's a deeper mechanism at work here, an unconscious loyalty that's more powerful than your conscious ambitions. You made an invisible pact, a sacred promise that you don't even remember making, and that promise says, I will not become more than you were, Mom. I will not surpass your level of happiness, success, or freedom, because if I do, I abandon you, and abandonment feels like death. This loyalty operates completely below conscious thought. It's not a decision you made, it's an emotional reality that was installed in your psyche before you had the ability to question it. Your identity became intertwined with hers, in such a way that your expansion feels like her diminishment. Your success feels like her failure. Your freedom feels like her imprisonment. Listen carefully. Every time you hold yourself back from your full potential, you think you're being humble, realistic, or responsible. But what you're really doing is maintaining an unconscious connection to your mother's limitations. You're staying loyal to her level of expansion because going beyond it feels like leaving her behind. This is why so many people self-sabotage right before major breakthroughs. It's why they find ways to lose the weight they gained, why they unconsciously destroy relationships that could take them to new levels, why they avoid opportunities that would catapult them beyond their current identity. Their unconscious mind reads expansion as abandonment, success as betrayal. Your mother's relationship with her own potential becomes your relationship with yours. If she was afraid of her power, you'll be afraid of yours. If she believed that too much success was selfish, you'll carry that guilt every time you achieve something significant. If she lived from scarcity, convinced that there wasn't enough goods to go around, you'll unconsciously limit yourself to make sure you don't take more than your share. But here's the brutal truth. Your smallness doesn't honor her. Your stagnation doesn't save her. Your self-limitation doesn't heal her wounds or validate her choices. It just ensures that both of you remain trapped in the same generational pattern. The real betrayal isn't surpassing her, it's wasting the potential she gave you. The real abandonment isn't growing beyond her limitations, it's abandoning the possibility that her sacrifices could create something greater. She gave you life, not so you could live it at her level, but so you could take it places she couldn't go. Think about it. What would truly honor the woman who brought you into this world? Staying small to make her feel better about staying small? Or becoming everything you're capable of becoming, showing that her investment in you created something magnificent? This unconscious loyalty shows up in countless ways. You might find yourself sharing your problems more than your successes because struggle feels safer than triumph. You might downplay your achievements or deflect compliments because receiving recognition feels like taking something away from her. You might choose partners or situations that keep you operating below your potential because operating at full capacity feels like hubris. The mother archetype in your psyche becomes a ceiling, not because she consciously wanted to limit you, but because your child mind confused loyalty with limitation. You learned that love meant staying connected through shared struggle, shared limitations, shared fears. You didn't learn that love could mean surpassing those limitations and taking the relationship to a new level. Breaking this unconscious loyalty requires a fundamental shift in how you understand honor, love, and connection. True honor isn't staying small, it's taking the gift of life she gave you and multiplying it beyond what either of you thought possible. True love isn't staying limited, it's showing what becomes possible when someone invests in another person's potential. The most profound act of gratitude you can offer isn't maintaining her level of limitation, it's transcending it. Not as rejection, not as abandonment, but as evolution. Not as a statement that she wasn't enough, but as proof that she was the beginning of something extraordinary. Your growth isn't betrayal, it's completion. Your expansion isn't abandonment, it's fulfillment. Your success isn't selfish, it's the fruit of her investment finally reaching maturity. Here's where everything changes. Because once you see the invisible loyalty, once you understand the unconscious ceiling, you face the most important choice of your entire development. Will you keep living someone else's limitations, or will you finally claim your own potential? Breaking generational patterns isn't about rejecting your mother or dismissing her influence. It's about separating what served her survival from what serves your expansion. It's about recognizing which of her strategies were responses to her specific circumstances and which are universal truths that should guide your life. Your mother developed her relationship with growth, risk, and possibility based on the information she had, the support she received, the opportunities available to her, and the dangers she faced. But your life is happening in different circumstances, with different support systems, different opportunities, and different challenges. What kept her safe might keep you small. What protected her might limit you. The first step in breaking this pattern is radical honesty about what you've inherited. Not just the obvious things, her fears about money or success, but the subtle, unconscious programs that operate in your daily decision-making. Notice how you negotiate with opportunity. Watch how you respond to your own ambitions. Observe what happens inside you when you imagine operating at a completely different level. Most people have never done this inventory because it feels like criticism of their mother, but it's not criticism, it's archaeology. You're excavating the foundation of your psyche to understand which elements support your growth and which elements constrain it. This isn't about judgment, it's about conscious choice. Ask yourself, what did she believe about people who had more than she did? How did she relate to her own talents and potential? What was her relationship with visibility, with standing out, with taking up space? What did she teach you about the price of success? What did her life demonstrate about what happens to people who reach for more than they have? These aren't just intellectual questions. Pay attention to your emotional responses as you consider them. Notice what creates anxiety, what brings up guilt, what feels disloyal to even think about. Those reactions will show you exactly where the unconscious programming is strongest. Breaking the pattern requires what Jung called differentiation, the ability to separate your identity from hers, your potential from her limitations, your path from her path. This doesn't mean cutting off connection. It means creating conscious connection instead of unconscious fusion. You can love your mother and still surpass her limitations. You can honor her sacrifices and still refuse to be limited by her fears. You can appreciate her guidance and still choose a different relationship with growth and possibility. This isn't contradiction, it's evolution. The generational pattern breaks when you stop inheriting unconsciously and start choosing consciously. When you stop automatically adopting her relationship with potential and start developing your own. When you stop using her life as the template for what's possible and start writing your own story about what becomes possible when someone is willing to grow beyond their origins. This requires enormous courage because you're stepping into territory she never mapped for you. You're venturing beyond the boundaries of what she could model, teach, or even imagine. You're becoming the first person in your lineage to operate at this level, and that can feel both terrifying and exhilarating. But here's what makes it worth it. When you break the pattern consciously, with love and awareness, rather than rebellion and rejection, you don't just free yourself. You change the trajectory for everyone who comes after you. Your expansion becomes the new ceiling for the next generation. Your relationship with growth becomes their starting point instead of their limitation. This is how generational healing actually works, not by staying small to honor the past, but by growing large enough to transform the future. Not by maintaining old limitations, but by demonstrating new possibilities. Not by repeating what was, but by creating what could be. Your mother gave you the foundation. Now it's your responsibility to build something on that foundation that neither of you could have imagined when you were learning what life was about. The pattern breaks when you realize that the greatest gift you can give your mother and yourself is becoming everything you're capable of becoming. And now we come to the final frontier, in the place where most people turn back because it requires something that feels impossible, becoming your own source of permission to grow, to expand, to become more than you've ever been before. All your life, you've been unconsciously seeking authorization for your next level, permission to want more, to try bigger things, to take up more space in the world. You've been waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to outgrow your current identity, to surpass your origins, to become someone your younger self couldn't have imagined. But here's the truth that will either liberate you or terrify you. That permission isn't coming from outside. Not from your mother, not from society, not from any external authority. The only permission that matters is the permission you give yourself. And giving yourself that permission requires becoming a completely different kind of person. You must become your own good mother, not the wounded, limited, fearful version you inherited, but the wise, supportive, infinitely believing version you needed. The one who sees your potential clearly and refuses to let you settle for less. The one who encourages your expansion instead of limiting it, who celebrates your growth instead of fearing it. This internal remothering isn't psychological theory, it's practical transformation. Every day, you're making decisions about what you're allowed to want, to try, to become. Those decisions are based on internal voices that either support your expansion or constrain it. Most people never question those voices. They just assume they're reality. But what if you could install new voices? What if you could create an internal support system that was designed for your growth instead of your limitation? What if, instead of inheriting your relationship with potential, you could design it? Start by listening to how you talk to yourself about your ambitions. Notice the voice that tells you to be realistic, to not get your hopes up, to stay within known boundaries. Ask yourself, is this my wisdom, or is this inherited fear? Is this protecting me from real danger, or is this limiting me based on outdated information? Then begin the process of conscious reprogramming. When you catch yourself limiting your vision based on what feels familiar or safe, pause and ask, what would I attempt if I believed I was fully supported in my growth? What would I try if I knew that expanding was not only safe but expected? The most successful people aren't those who had perfect mothers or ideal childhoods. They're those who learned to become their own source of encouragement, their own permission givers, their own believers in what's possible. They developed an internal relationship with growth that supported expansion instead of limiting it. This means celebrating your own progress instead of waiting for external validation. It means encouraging yourself to try bigger things instead of talking yourself out of them. It means treating your ambitions as sacred instead of as proof of selfishness or unrealistic thinking. Your growth becomes unstoppable when you realize that the only opinion that matters about your potential is yours. When you stop needing anyone else to believe in your possibilities before you pursue them. When you become willing to be the first person in your lineage to operate at a completely different level. But there's something even more profound that happens when you become your own source of growth permission. You stop needing to rebel against your mother's limitations and start building on her foundation. You stop seeing her influence as something to escape and start seeing it as something to transform and transcend. This is the ultimate maturity, the ability to honor where you came from while refusing to be limited by it. To appreciate the gifts you received while adding your own gifts to the generational story. To love your mother enough to become everything she couldn't, not as rejection of her, but as completion of what she started. Your growth stops being about proving something or escaping something and starts being about creating something. Something that honors your origins while expanding far beyond them. Something that shows what becomes possible when someone refuses to be limited by inherited ceilings and starts building their own sky. The mother you needed wasn't perfect. She was just someone who believed in your potential more than she believed in your limitations. Someone who encouraged your expansion more than she feared your independence. Someone who celebrated your growth instead of feeling threatened by it. You can become that mother to yourself. And when you do, your growth becomes limitless because it's no longer constrained by anyone else's fear, anyone else's limitations, anyone else's vision of what's possible. You become the author of your own potential, and that, finally, is where real growth begins.